Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice, the podcast where the heart of agriculture meets the pulse of today's industry. From policy changes to leadership stories in the Western lifestyle, The Rancher's Voice dives into the stories that matter most to ag producers.
Okay. Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice. I'm Rayleigh Honeycutt, joined by Ellie Brighton, and today we have a really exciting interview with Chris, and I hope that our listeners will enjoy it as much as we do. So let's get right to it.
All right. So today we're thrilled to have Chris Fisk with us for this very special edition of The Rancher's Voice. Chris is a Dillon native and attended college at the University of Montana Western and MSU Billings, where he received a Bachelor's of Science and Master's degree in education. His concentration in teaching was that of Montana and Butte history, which he retired from in 2022. Welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me. We got a little unexpected snow. I wanted to do this face-to-face in your studio, but it's Butte. We're used to snow here. It's not June, but we get snow in June too, so that's okay.
I feel like we gave our listeners just a little snippet of you, but also I think what's something noteworthy about you is in 2010, you also were the National American History Teacher of the Year. So congratulations on that. That was through the
Thank you.
Daughters of the American Revolution. Very cool to have you here. As many of our members know and listeners know, we are headed to Butte for our mid-year meeting at the end of May, and you will be speaking at the mid-year meeting. But what we thought we would do today is kind of chat with you a little about Butte history and kind of give them a little sneak peek about the place that they're going to visit, as well as maybe some of the things that you'll be talking to us while you're in Butte with us.
That's perfect. We're excited to have you. People can say what they'd like about Butte, but you see, I guess you get what you see in our case. And in Butte, I like to say it's got a nice touch of Norman Rockwell. You've got a community historically that's been pulling itself up by its bootstraps for 100 years, and they really don't know the difference here. The one thing they do know is that they like visitors, number one. And number two, they're very proud of their community. So when I first moved to Butte from Dillon, it was an adjustment. Take my word for that. It was definitely an adjustment. But I landed incredibly well. Butte is historically began at the same time as your gold rushes, if you will. We had some big ones prior to Butte taking off. You had Gold Creek, and then you had Bannock, and then Alder Gulch. And once Alder Gulch hit, that was a huge gold strike. And they simply came up and over the divide and wound up in Summit Valley, which eventually will be Butte, Montana. That started with gold. 1872, we went to silver. And prior to that, the gold was placer mining. And so that's the process, taking gravel and dirt and liquefying it and using your gold pan and sluice box. Silver was hard rock, and so they had to get to the bedrock to do that. When they did, they discovered huge deposits of metal, not just silver. And as many know, what they hit was definitely copper, and they hit it at the right time. Before all was said and done, Butte, Montana is going to produce 30% of all the copper during the industrial era in the world. And so when you hear the term the richest hill on earth, and it's funny, I've had tourists and people say, well, the richest hill on earth, that's kind of cocky. Term we use in education is ethnocentric, but it's not. It's absolutely true. And they've held on to that with great humility. And we have the remnants of that sitting in our backyard.
Absolutely. So, obviously you have a passion for history, but what really brought you to becoming this local Butte history expert?
Well, it was for me, it was a pretty natural process. I was teaching and had been teaching Montana history for a number of years, but within that curriculum, we added Butte. And why? Well, for us as educators, as you know, when you go through history, if you were to look at it like a deck of cards, right? So we had early inhabitants, Native Americans, indigenous peoples. Then we get into Lewis and Clark. After Lewis and Clark, it was the fur trapping era. But from that fur trapping era on, it wasn't just a single card that's going to develop Montana or Butte for that matter. All of a sudden, we're dealing with these new inventions, the industrial era. We're chasing gold, numerous different locations within the state. The silver industry had taken off. The first railroads had come to the state of Montana. So modernizing in those earliest of days, to the shock of most people, came to one town, Butte. By 1917, we pushed near 100,000 people. We were the biggest city west of the Mississippi, all the way to San Francisco. And what followed that was the infrastructure and the community-based businesses that went with that, and of course, livestock. The people can't eat air. And so we were definitely ankle deep in that area. And furthermore, as you start to develop in time, we're going to get a highway system. We're going to get advanced railroads. And Butte sat at the I-15, I-90 corridor. So from this town, you could virtually go all four directions, north, south, east, and west. And although at the time Butte didn't take full advantage of that, we're certainly going to make the map as far as marketing and markets were concerned for early livestock. In 1889, you guys already know this, but there were some real struggles in the state between the livestock industry and mining. They were the biggest. Who's going to get the tax breaks, and who's more important? Well, at that time, as you guys know, the mining interests via the Copper Kings, William Clark, Marcus Daly, Fritz Augustus Heinze, they controlled damn near everything, and that would include our legislature. And so, at the same time, where we're looking to develop a fervent livestock industry, which we didn't have to look far. I mean, that began early with our gold rushes and early homesteaders via greenfoot trading and greenhorn trading and wide open ranges, Montana grass, it's alfalfa. I mean, guys, we were more than a destination point. We were a absolute historical stop off that helped settle the Northwest, if not the West. It's pretty cocky, isn't it? It sounds like those Butte people, just not painted green on March 17th during St. Patrick's Day.
So you mentioned like 117,000 people were down in Butte. And when you really think about that, I mean, like that's bigger than Billings right now. Like that is a lot of people for the time.
Mm-hmm.
So take us back to those earlier days. Like what was it like? What was the hustle and bustle of Butte like with that many people in that small community? Well, I guess it wasn't that small if it was 117,000 people.
We every time we jump back into our books, we find something new. How do I do this without going too overboard? We were hell bent for leather barge out in the middle of nowhere. We ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We had one of the largest red light districts in the country. 1,000 ladies of the evening peddled their wares, coinciding with the shifts of the miners. 20,000, 17,000, 20,000 or so were single male miners from all over the world. So although red light districts were definitely looked down on at that time, it served a purpose in Butte, and we avoided a lot of other more serious problems because of that. I think, Butte had problems letting things go. Our last brothels closed in 1982, the year I graduated from high school. So I guess traditions are hard to die. That's
Absolutely.
one single example. They flooded into here by the thousands, guys. And what I like talking about Butte, the old city, when we were near 100,000, when we had this massive influx of immigrants, of people westward expansion and the part and parcel of westward prosperity as it would come and go. And Butte was, of course, as boom and bust as everyone. When they started flooding into here, guys, was long before we were even a city. Okay, 1872, William Clark's gonna kind of began that miner rush. By then, Butte's population was down 240, and they hit silver. And then they have stamp mills, and then they put up smelters, and then this invention called the light bulb. And beyond the silver, we had this trash metal for the most part that got in the way. It was so expensive to process. It was called copper. And when they saw that this, soft, pliable, malleable metal could carry electricity over long distances without melting down, well, all of a sudden a worldwide call for copper would come. And when it did, the richest hill on earth was there. Okay. People flooded into here by the hundreds early and by the thousands later on. Prior to the advent of automobiles and public transportation, you lived near where you worked. And the work in Butte was mining. So as you look at Summit Valley and Butte proper now, it looks like it sits in the valley. That wasn't how it was when we were pushing near 100,000. Of course, we were spread out, and we had a number of different peripheral businesses, i.e. livestock, dairies, illegal bootlegging, which prohibition didn't go over in Butte at all. But what that forced was these people that had come from all over the world and the eastern United States, you lived near where you worked. And the work in Butte was mining. And so this is going to formulate some small enclaves. Birds of a feather flock together. And it's in these small enclaves that you'd find people who spoke the same language, ate the same food, same religion. And that's going to give birth to ethnic neighborhoods. Butte settled out very similar to that of New York. We don't have the Points or the Greens or the Bronx, but what we did have was Dublin Gulch, Corktown, Meaderville, McQueen, Eastside, Williamsburg. It goes on and on and on. And they were very territorial at that time. Of course, that mellowed over the years. But it was a very diverse population. And it was a population that brought so many different skills to the Big Sky country at a time that it was really needed. So I would describe Butte just wild, historically wild, and it was progressive. And guess what? Nothing's changed.
I was going to say, I don't think that's much of a difference from today.
No, and they love, when you hear the term visitors, we use that loosely, but this town has truly got a nice little touch of Norman Rockwell. We like our visitors. We like to have tourists. This is not a community where they're going to say, well, come on down, we'll shine your boots for $1. Don't come to Butte expecting that. These people get up and go to work every day, and they enjoy having visitors, but they do not like to kowtow to arrogance. That'll cause you trouble really quick in this town.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
I don't think it is either, but do you understand what I'm saying? This town marches to the beat of a different drum. It's not a bad drum, but it's their own, and they don't make excuses for it. You'll see T-shirts that say Butte versus everyone and Butte tough, and I think in a lot of cases it is like that. But there's definitely a cultural difference here. There really is. And you hear the term Butte tough. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say we're all tough, but I can guarantee you we certainly have our blue ribbons hanging where we need to. And we could start with Evel Knievel and end with Tommy Malott.
Yes, go Tommy.
Or Colt Anderson or Dylan Cook. Or, we've got a number of kids in the NFL, either coaching or playing. We've got very successful business people, Gilman Construction, of course, statewide, and even some incredibly successful people who got their start in a mining city. And that's no different historically that we've seen for the last 100 years.
Yeah, so the city going and working 24 hours a day, I actually haven't had the privilege of going down into the mine tour that currently operates, but know people who have, and we actually are offering it during our conventions for people to visit the mine. But there's a lot of things that happen when you work in a mining or a mine that, like, from the darkness to like eating lunch in the dark, all of that has to help shape the town. So from a miner's perspective, was it really that you heard that, they'd work even if the night shift, the bars were open in the morning because the miners would get off
Yeah.
work and go to the bars. Like, how did that help shape Butte?
How did the bars help shape Butte?
No,
Well,
no, no. How
we
did
had
the
a
miners?
boatload of bars, still do.
No, the miners kind of in the 24-hour liveliness of the town. Yeah.
I think as we look at its history, you guys, different ethnic backgrounds did not get along. It instilled a sense of identity, and I think that identity still exists. But when you went underground, that's a whole different world down there. First and foremost, it was and still is underground hard rock mining, one of the most dangerous jobs you could take. You had mothers in Butte, Montana, hoping that their children join the war efforts, instead of going underground. Um, when we go to Bozeman and we talk about the livestock industry, we got to visit about Nelson's story and the technology used to get through Red Cloud's reservation and settling in the Bozeman area and the granaries in Butte. We had to deal with excessive capital murders. We had to figure out how to get that thing under control during the same time period. And we did. It's called executions, which we still have our execution gallows in the basement, and they work really well. We took them out and put them together and played with them. But it was a world where above ground you may not get along so well, but underground you didn't have a choice. When things went sideways down in the mines, people got hurt, they got died. You got died. Thank God I didn't teach English. You had people who had to rely on each other. And that instilled a sense of community that crossed ethnic lines. And it brought a united identity. And back before we became a state, I had a tourist tell me, you guys call yourselves Butte America. What makes you more America than anyone else? Well, I kicked her out of my tour first. So that will start there. If you look at history, guys, we settled out as a city in 1879. That was 10 years before we were even a state. When you had mail sent to people beginning in 1979 to Butte, Montana, which you're pushing 20, 30,000 people, which was massive back then, right? It was Butte, America. Montana wasn't in any existence at that time. So they were, of course, kicking it around and trying to figure out those boundaries before livestock and mining and those collisions that came together. But it all kind of formulated into a beautiful little community that sits at the base of the Rocky Mountains, a little Dublin in the Rockies. And it's half underground, guys, 10,000 miles worth of mine shafts. It's a city underneath a city for real. And the history that has occurred here is remarkable. And it's at multiple cards, multiple levels. I just mentioned Evil Knievel and Tommy Malott, but how about Omar Bradley? How about
Never
Charlie
heard of him.
Chaplin? Omar Bradley is a famous military leader during World War I and World War II. He had graduated from West Point in 1914 with the famed West Point graduates that would go on to become great military leaders. And for us here in Butte, of course, following the miners came the labor industry. And with that came a Gibraltar unionism. And Butte was one of the earliest of those. It was a matter of necessity, I think, at that time. People were dying wholesale down in the mines, and it was for a profit. And for the big business owners, that are separated 3 or 4 levels from that type of employment, those employees that worked for them, they needed to get the hint, and they would in 1878. And that's going to be Butte's first union. It's called the Butte Workingmen's Union. And within years, it's going to go to the Butte Miners Union and then the World Federation of Miners, which continues to this day. I'm not looking to get in any arguments about, whether organized labor is good or bad. At that time in Butte, it was good and still is. Butte is a Gibraltar in the area of labor organization. But instead of dying at the 600-foot level because no one installed vent fans or ways to keep down silicone dust, it's a death sentence, period. And you're not going to find many other professions historically in the state of Montana that go with that kind of risk. And I don't care if it's livestock, good, it has its dangerous points. Highway patrolman, policeman, fireman, picket, whatever you want. Butte's had over 2,500 fatalities underground. Butte is still home to the largest hard rock mining disaster in the history of this country. It's called the Granite Mountain Speculator Disaster. 168 dead miners in one shot. And so when you look at how Butte played out, yes, it's ethnic. Yes, it's tough. It's got its own little quirks, but they are as sincere about that as they get. They've had their fair share of struggles, and in fact, we still do. Just Butte folks really don't notice it as much. They're used to this level of existence, and they're good at it, and they're pride filled for it, and they should be. We haven't killed an economic elephant here in decades. Although at one time we were the elephant, and it was called the Anaconda Company, and it was the copper collar on the world, and we did as we pleased. So I guess a little historical get back now is never hurting anyone. But what it does leave in its tracks is a shadow of the history of the Big Sky at all levels, and I think that's what makes Butte great to visit. It's very Norman Rockwellish.
So you obviously know all there is to know about Butte. What are a couple of your favorite places in Butte that you like to go?
Like legal ones?
All of them,
Okay.
legal or otherwise.
Oh, that's so
The
tough.
illegal ones
You
we'll put on
know,
our after show.
Yeah.
Like historically, I headquarter out of the Chamber of Commerce, and that's a great outlet for things to do here in Butte. In fact, it's the number one outlet for that. Whether you're going to go to the mining museum or do a trolley tour or a walking tour, Old Butte Historical Adventures, the Cabbage Patch, Dumas Brothel, longest running house of ill repute in the history of the United States. Pekin, Chop Suey and Noodle Parlor, oldest Asian restaurant in the country. Where?
I've been there.
Butte, America. And so we have a lot of fun with that. If I was coming to Butte, or if I had family coming to Butte that had never seen Butte before, I would see. I definitely start at the chamber to see what's open. Okay, but most things are coming open now for the tourist season. Obviously, I would tell them. Oh, it's a toughie. World Museum of Mining is good. I would see the Dumas Brothel.
Is that underground or above ground?
That's above ground, but some
Okay.
of it is underground. They have the
Okay.
original underground cribs. Okay. And that was really cheap shopping. Okay. I shouldn't say cheap, inexpensive. It wasn't a good place, I think for gals to work. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent there because there were many that wanted that uh, uh, job profession. Okay, it's the oldest in the world. It might be the oldest profession in the world, but Butte embraced it totally. You look through our history, and there was different types of workers throughout our years. I would tell them to go to the Dumas. Opened in 1890, officially closed for business in 1982, the year I graduated from high school. I remember when it was open, and everybody looks at us like we're nuts. It served a purpose, and it was certainly adds color to our history. So I would hit those. I would do the trolley tour. That just gives you an excellent overview of what we have to offer.
So you mentioned the people, and I'm gonna totally go off script now because one of the people that I've fascinated about in Butte is Gertie and Gertie's babies.
Oh,
So
yeah.
can you
Oh my God.
so can you give our listeners just like a short version of Gertie and her babies?
My God. Okay. Well, you could have picked something easier like Sister Mary Amadeus or Father Beretta. Whatever.
Well, I have friends in Butte and they told me about Gertie and I just
Gertie
I've seen
Pitcairn.
a PBS special on her, but something that a lot of people don't know about.
She truly is so fascinated by Gertie.
Gertie Pitcairn is kind of a blessing and a condemnation all in one. A lot of people look at her, quote, one of Gertie's babies called her an angel.
Okay.
But you look at your history books, others would call her a murderer and sold black market babies.
So where did she get the babies?
In Butte, beginning in the mid 30s, a guy by the name of Gustav Pitcairn came to Butte. And Gustav was a general practitioner. He specialized in women's health. To be frank, he ran abortion clinics. Gustav is going to get married, and he is going to marry a nurse practitioner of chiropractics named Gertie.
Okay.
And they had a happy marriage. They went into business together. A few years down the road, Gustav dies. And Gertie, his nurse wife of orthopedics, picks up the family's business and continues that. Now, at one time, it sat on the fifth floor of Metals Bank. And if you've been to Butte at Park and Main, that great big massive building, he was on the fifth floor of that. If you head up and go to Hamilton Street on the corner of there and Granite, not overly huge buildings, big for, I guess, like Dillon and Melrose and all of those, but she had moved the practice to there. So if you got yourself in trouble at that time, you could come to Butte and have the procedure done. Nobody would know the difference, and you would go home. Others who didn't want to terminate their pregnancy would virtually come to Butte and stay in association with Gertie Pitcairn, and then would go full term. Prior to what Gertie was doing and selling those babies on the black market, which is disgustingly thing to say, I'm sure Catholic Social Services handled things here. Butte's very Irish Catholic. We had 9 separate parishes in Butte alone at that time. Half the diocese was located in one town. So if it came to that, after the delivery of the child or just prior to that, they could tie into Catholic Social Services. Then Catholic Social Services would find the adequate family. That costs money, period. And as what Gertie did was cut the middleman out. And in this case, it was Catholic Social Services. Instead of giving the baby up to them to find a family for the right price, by gosh, Gertie Pitcairn could find you a family instantly by putting your name on the birth certificate, which simply circumvented that whole process. There was a price that went with it. And you'd go home with a little baby with your name on the birth certificate. And it would cost a price, but you'd get away with it.
And how long did this like go on? Like decades?
Well over a decade. When she finally went to court, understand, Gertie was brought up on manslaughter charges 3 times for botched abortions. And her little black book of services rendered, so much so she didn't even bother to show up the 3rd time when she was charged. By then, her husband was one of the head detectives in the Butte department, and it just went out and was thrown out, quote, due to lack of evidence, due to a lack of every single time. Well, when you got a black book that lists every gal and every politician, judge, policeman, high-ranking city officials from Butte and Dillon, Anaconda, Helena, lots out of Helena, by God, you did your best to do what you had to do. And so when we talk about those seedier elements and the black heart of Montana, that fed right into it. She'd sell the babies and they could go anywhere. We do know of one that was in Twin Bridges. Notice I'm not going to use any names. A number of them still here in Butte. We do know that at least 28 babies were given false birth certificates. And there was even, although we can't find a ton of evidence on it, that sometimes if it was a good looking mother, um, I was told this by an old timer, that they'd act as if the child was stillborn. And they'd run the mother the other way and they'd take the child the other way. Oh, it's an emergency, and out the back door into a truck or a truck waiting there. And mother would be told, sorry, your child passed. We'll take care of this. When actually they just simply bumped the price up and sold it. And we do know of
Wow.
one case of that over in Twin Bridges. And we can get graphic about it. But Gertie, she found homes for these kids. So some think of her as an angel. Others think of her as a murderer. I am a history teacher. I'm not here to pass judgment one way or another. But it just adds to the logs of history that stick here in Butte. Butte was a good place to prosper as well. When you talk about it's the Irish. We can talk about the Irish. That's our most visible ethnic influence. If you were a worker in Ireland, a miner in Ireland, right, you made 6 cents a day. You come to Butte, Montana on Marcus Daly's bill, his ticket, you're going to make up to $3.25, $3.50, in some cases $3.75 an hour.
Wow.
Okay. Later on in the process, in the beginning, if you could make $3, $4, $5 a day, you have a population that's just immigrated to here that will work between 6 cents a day and $3.25 a day. Well, that wasn't hard to do, and they flooded into here from all over the world. In their eyes, Butte streets were paved with gold. At a time in Ireland where they were under British colonial control, where they were starving to death, persecuted terribly by the British Crown, you had a community out in the middle of the Rocky Mountains where if you went there, you were guaranteed a job. The Irish could work for the Irish, which was very unique in our country at a time where they were putting signs up that said the Irish need not apply. The Irish, similar to that of the Chinese, actually got a decent foothold in Butte. And I would describe decent for the Chinese. The Irish got a very strong foothold here. Before all is said and done, they're going to run everything. They're going to run the courthouse, the police station, hospitals, schools, churches. They ran it all. Still do. And that's coming from a Polish Indian. So it's exciting to see the way that all played out. And Butte streets, for some folks, are still paved with gold.
All right, Chris. Well, as we wrap up, we did want to flip to the paranormal a little bit. Does Butte have a rich history of ghost stories or places that are haunted?
Well, if you can find any better in the state, I challenge you to do it. In fact, we'll go even further. How about the Northwestern United States?
Oh, wow.
With that hell-bent for leather barge past and the energies and violence that took place here. And then there's one other thing. We are the largest Butte National Historical Landmark District in the United States. Number one. We used to be number two to a place called New Orleans. And this thing called Hurricane Katrina scooted us up the list. Why? Well, at the time that we were the copper collar on the world, not only the industrial era, but it was also vintage Butte. It was the Gilded Age. And what it left in its wake were these incredible pre and post Victorian mansions, buildings, mansions that were built, for example, 1884 through 1889. Okay? We didn't even have electricity back then, but Butte did. Not only did we have electricity, we had sewage, we had running water. And so our mansions were some of the first in the country to have those amenities. The Copper King Mansion had running water and electricity before the White House in Washington, D.C. And so when you look at your past and those things that, like they said, oh, prohibition never worked in Butte. Well, no, it didn't. We were a community of ethnic makeups from all over the world where the consumption of alcohol was every meal. You couldn't drink their water. And I don't suppose Butte water was really good back then.
Is it
Um,
good now?
it's we have some of the best water in the world. I've
Okay.
been drinking Butte water for like 30 years, and it's had no effect on us at all. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you. No, but on a serious note, we've got incredible water here. We don't get our water from the Berkeley pit. Okay.
That's
Um,
great to hear.
that water is, they mine the water and they clean it up, and then it's discharged into Silver Bow Creek heading to the Pacific. We get our water out of reservoirs. Okay. Pure spring runoff. And our water is incredible. I'm telling you, Ellie, get your red sweatshirt. We're going to buy you a glass of water in Butte. That's how we
Can't
feel.
wait. I'll bring my water bottle.
In it.
So to loop,
So
so
the
to loop
other
back to
things
my
to see.
question, where is the most haunted place in Butte, or where can you
Well, you're not going to
experience?
let me off on that. Okay.
No.
There is an outfit called Spooks and Spirits.
Okay.
Okay. Have you heard of that?
I haven't, but I didn't even know your hat said that when I asked this question. So I feel like
Well,
we're
it's
in a
self-serving.
line.
That's a little tour company that I own, and what that deals is with the hauntings and history of Butte. They've written books about hauntings in Butte. Ellen Baumler out of Helena
Yeah.
was a great friend of the mining city, personal friend of mine. God bless her. We miss her. It's a form of entertainment, if you will, now, and it's really popular. What kind of hauntings? Dumas Brothel, loaded. Place called the Myra and the Cabbage Patch. I would rank those as the best hauntings in the state. Deer Lodge State Penitentiary has its very much pluses. When I get the call and I've got to take someone out to prove, because that's what they all want, right? We want to know ghosts exist. We take them to the Dumas or the Cabbage Patch in Myra. Although there are, oh God, if I pulled my file out, 52 different locations. We do a hauntings tour every October with the trolley, and we change that up every year. New hauntings, new locations. We do during the tourist season. We have a hauntings tour on Wednesday nights. It's called Whispers from the Grave, and we go out and run around Mountain View Cemetery, look at the famous of Butte, Frank Little, Evil Knievel, the Madams, a couple of the workers, East Owner Ranch, fame figures, and then we go hunt ghosts at an old pub. And it's a lot of fun. People have a tendency to really go overboard and have a blast.
People love that. I am not a fan of that, but I'm sure you could scare the crap out of me, Chris, because
Well, that's why we do it. That's why people, they don't go on this to go, oh, well, that's a beautiful old building with a half inch of dust in it.
I've been to the old Montana prison and seen some
Yeah.
weird things, and if that doesn't match up to Butte, then Butte is probably not on my bucket list because I don't know if I
Well,
can handle it.
in Deer Lodge, that's a wonderful hunt, and
Yeah.
good people down there with that committee and their museums. You know, I think the big key to that is to get people that do the history tours. You know, there isn't going to be a ghost story out there that doesn't have good legendary, urban legendary, or at least some facts behind it. And neat thing about Butte, we're accessible. We're very accessible. Haunted Collector, the TV show, Ghost Adventures, The Dead Files, Codes and Conspiracies, the Travel Channel even did a full series on Butte called The Ghosts of Devil's Perch. They did a really nice, that's on Paramount and Discovery, just prior to them shooting 1923 here. And Butte's, of course, we've really rocketed in movie and TV and whatnot. So it's been good for all of us. The hauntings of Butte. Now, I guess you could just say our ghosts of the past are still taking care of the ghosts of our present.
Oh, that's a great way to end this interview, I think.
It is.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Again, Chris hopefully gave you a little bit of history that will entice you or encourage you to come join us at our mid-year meeting, which will be May 28th through the 30th in Butte. Chris will speak at Coffee Talks during our Coffee Talks session on Friday, May 30th. So hopefully you will join us at that event and hear a bit more. I am excited to hear what else you have to tell us when you
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about Butte history.
If you ever make it to Butte and you're looking for a tour, history, or hauntings, you can find us on Facebook, Spooks and Spirits, or just give the Chamber of Commerce a call. They'll get you pointed in the right direction, and Butte looks forward to seeing you folks.
Absolutely.
We like it. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and to our listeners, if you guys enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and follow Montana Stockgrowers in the Rancher's Voice.